Hello, everyone. I hope you had a great weekend of NFL football. We still have one game left tonight coming on. But as we go into that game and have this little bit of a day break to reflect on the weekend, let's reflect back on some losing teams in the Super Bowl and the best of them. We have Ed Kleese joining us to tell us about his top 10 teams that lost the Super Bowl. Ed's up in just a moment to tell us all about it.
This is the Pigskin Daily History Dispatch, a podcast that covers the anniversaries of American football events throughout history. Your host, Darren Hayes, is podcasting from America's North Shore to bring you the memories of the gridiron, one day at a time.
Hello, my football friends. This is Darren Hayes of PigskinDispatch.com. Welcome once again to the Pig Pen, your portal to positive football history. And it is time for a top 10 list. We haven't done one of these for a few weeks now, and we have Ed Kleese here visiting us, the top 10 specialist. Ed, welcome back to the Pig Pen.
Hey, Darren. I always get very excited for these.
Yeah, these are a lot of fun. You have a very imaginative and very accurate mind in recalling things that have happened in the past. And this will be interesting to hear because you have a very interesting topic that you're going to share with us tonight. And maybe you want to tell us what that is with your top 10.
Sure. It's plenty of people have done the 10 best teams of all times, 10 best Super Bowl winners of all times. I thought it would be interesting and kind of fun to go back and try to find the 10 best teams to have lost the Super Bowl, or the 10 teams maybe that are forever tortured because maybe they were better than the team that actually won the Super Bowl, or just had terrible luck in terms of who they matched up against. But the 10 teams of all of the teams that made the Super Bowl that didn't win it, that are the best.
All right. Well,
The missing rings, I think they call it.
So
right?
you got like 57 candidates to choose from here.
50. It was. What's funny is a lot of these have been really hard. The top 10 lists. This one actually, it was. I got it down to about 15, and it was kind of hard from there. But it actually was not terribly difficult to just say cross off, cross off, cross off. We had a very long stretch there in the 80s when the NFC dominated, and then again, kind of through a lot of the 90s, and then the first part of the 2000s, where the Super Bowl losers just weren't terribly impressive for the most part. They're, kind of like magical years, came out of nowhere, playoff runs, teams that were just so inferior to the team that they played in the Super Bowl. So it actually wasn't as hard as I thought. It was the very end there, and then ranking the actual top 10 was tough, but it was very easy to eliminate, 2/3 of the teams right off the bat.
All right. Well, I am interested to hear what you have to say, my friend. So why don't you go ahead? Let's give us the number 10 that you came up with.
Yeah, number 10. So we're going to go pretty far back. We're going number 10. We're going to say the 1973 Minnesota Vikings. And I thought it would be looking at it, I felt like they lost 4 Super Bowls in the 70s, right? The Vikings.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like we needed to pick at least one of those teams to sort of represent that era of Vikings football. And looking at the 73 Vikings back in the 14-game season, they held half of their games. That defense was incredible, right? You had 3 Hall of Famers on the defense. And that does not include Jim Marshall, who I know a lot of people think is a Hall of Fame snub. Unfortunately, he just passed away this past summer. So if he ever gets in, it'll be, I don't like it when they do they do it posthumously. I don't like that at all. So at this point, maybe it's better if he doesn't get in. So they had 3 Hall of Famers plus Marshall, and then obviously a Hall of Fame quarterback, Fran Tarkenton as well. They went 14-2. I'm sorry, 12-2, 14-game season. And in half of those games, they held their opponent to single digits, which is pretty wild.
Purple People Eaters.
The Purple People Eaters, yes. The reason that I only had them 10th and maybe didn't have them a little higher, and really they were kind of on the verge of not making it at all, is because they were really non-competitive in the Super Bowl against the Dolphins that year. And that was the year after the Dolphins went undefeated, when maybe you would think Miami would be a little ripe for the picking. It's harder to repeat. That game was 24-0 at one point. It wound up being 24-7. And what's really funny is, do you have any idea how many passes that Bob Greasy completed against the Vikings defense in that game?
It was very few. I know that because I think they were running the ball with the Mercury Morrison Zonka and kick.
6.
Six.
He completed 6 passes for like 60 yards passing in a game that they won going away. So, the Purple People Eaters in the Super Bowl kind of just got run over. Like so what they'd done all year long, they
Purple
just
pancakes.
purple pancakes. There you go. So that kind of that took them down a few notches for me. But it doesn't take away the fact that that was they dominated the NFC. They were Hall of Famers all along the defense, one of the better defenses of all time, and are number 10 on my list.
Okay, so you're saying they were the better for the entire season, the entirety of the season, not the better competition in the Super Bowl.
Correct.
Okay, I
Yes.
got you.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes. They were probably the best team in the NFL that year. Obviously, Miami proved that wrong. In the Super Bowl. But yes, I would say that throughout the entirety of the year, of all of the Minnesota teams that lost the Super Bowl, this is probably the one that the fans lament the most.
Okay, very interesting. All right. So who do you have at number 9?
Number 9, we're going to fast forward many, many years to the 1997 Green Bay Packers, who were going for their back-to-back Super Bowls, having won it in 96 fairly easily over New England. It was a fairly easy run in 96. 97, the Packers got off to a slightly slower start. By midseason, they were kind of, I wouldn't say struggling, but maybe not dominating. But then they won their last 5 games of the year very, very easily. That was a very, very balanced team. They won both of their playoff games at home in Lambeau without a whole lot of trouble. And they were 11 and a half point favorites going
Hmm.
into the Super Bowl against the Broncos. That's about as lopsided as you're going to ever see in the Super Bowl. So the Packers were huge favorites. Of course, John Elway did his thing. It was a kind of a magical night for the Broncos. They win the game. It was a very close game. It was a 7 point game. It was a good game. So the Packers were highly competitive in the game, but just got upset. Just got upset. Green Bay was the better team. They were the better team all year. You're not going to be an 11 and a half point favorite and not be the better team, but they weren't the better team that night. And I really think that loss um, really kind of mars Favre's career a little bit. I think history. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer. Most people have him, top 5, top 10 of all time. So it's not like we're kind of splitting hairs here. But I think that the one Super Bowl kind of lingers over him a little bit. And I think the narrative's a little bit different if he's back to back Super Bowl champions or Super Bowl MVPs, which he probably would have been had they won the game.
Yeah, I think, I mean, it was very much a milestone moment because I remember that, vividly. I think everybody just assumed the Packers were going to roll them because John Elway never does very well in the Super Bowls. What do you have, 4 losses before that going in? And, he was washed up. He was the end of his career. And all he did was come out and play a remarkable game. And, running back, TD was all over the place. And, doing his thing and made him I think that was his most productive season for Terrell Davis that year too. And he had a nice game, and the defense for the Denver Broncos really came on strong too, and played, showed that powerful offense of the Packers and what was what. And that was really an exciting game and to watch, and the outcome with it. And this one's for John, and the whole
Right.
thing. That was kind of fun. And these two gunslingers just going at it, is what the buildup was, and it was kind of fun.
And it had an all-time great NFL film soundbite too, because Terrell Davis sort of famously struggled with migraines, and
Hmm.
they're down there by the goal line, and he's having a migraine, and he tells Mike Shanahan on the sideline, he says, "Coach, I can't see right now." And Shanahan just looks at him and says, "You don't have to see anything on this play. But they won't believe it if you're not in the game." So it was a fake handoff, a play action down by the goal line for a touchdown, but they needed Davis in the game in order for the Packers to believe it. So Mike Shanahan says, "You don't have to be able to see on this one." So they sent him back out there with his migraine.
Thank God he
Um,
wasn't lined up backwards or something, right?
yes, but yes. So that's my number 9 is the 97 Packers.
All right. So who do we have at the Ocho?
Ocho, number 8 is the greatest show on turf, the 2001 St. Louis Rams. Really, it was a 3-year window that they were the greatest show on turf. 99, 2000, and 2001. And they won it, of course, in 99. If you remember, Vermeil retired right after that. Mike
Mhm.
Martz took over in 2000. And in 2000, the offense was still, so they were the number one offense in the league in 99, in 2000, and in 2001, 3 years in a row. But in 2000, their defense took a big step back. They went 10-6. They lost in the playoffs, but they bounced right back in 2001. And their defense got way better. They went from 23rd in the league, I believe, to top five, maybe to number three on defense. And their offense stayed at number one. And they went 14-2 that year. I think they were definitely better than. I actually think that team was better than their 99 team that won it. Again, huge favorites in the Super Bowl. Don't necessarily need to rehash that. That's going to be Brady's first Super Bowl in New Orleans. U2 at halftime, post 9/11. A lot of emotion in the building. Huge underdogs at that point because it was the third year in a row that we'd seen the Rams. They were sort of the villain in the game to an extent. A brilliant game plan by Bill Belichick to take Marshall Faulk out of that game, um, and um, and they got Brady'd at the end. One thing I will point out that I've always liked is I'm a huge Kurt Warner guy, huge, and he played in 3 Super Bowls, right? And in all 3 Super Bowls, he led a game tying or game winning touchdown drive in all 3 of them in the final minutes. Just so happened that in 2 of them, he didn't have the ball last. So, he tied the game in 2001 against the Patriots and never got the ball back. Kind of happened again to your guys against the Steelers. He had a Hail Mary chance, but Roethlisberger got him in that one. So, but that 2001 Rams team
I
was.
think James Harrison got him at the end of the first
That's
half on
true.
that
Yes,
one.
that's right. Yeah, the 2001 Rams were excellent, a sensational offense, and they were better than the 2001 Patriots. But I guess, that was when the legend of Brady was born.
Yeah, that's definitely a good one. I like that pick. All right, so who do you have at 7?
7 is going to be, you had 4 choices here. So I went ahead and took the 1990 Buffalo Bills. This list would not be complete without a Bills team. The reason that I chose 90 specifically is because I believe I mentioned this on the pod before. 91, I'm sorry, yeah, 91, 92, 93, they were not as good as the Redskins or Cowboys in those games. That was a little bit of bad luck for the Bills. They were the second best team in the league 3 years in a row. In 1990, they were the best team. They were better than the Giants, especially when you factored in that the Giants had a backup quarterback starting in the Super Bowl.
They might not have
Um,
had a better kicker in that game though.
oh God, yeah. I think I mentioned this before. My mom's family is all from Buffalo, and it's talk about painful. Now the city responded very well to Norwood and that team, but it's still, yeah, wide right is always going to be painful because that was their team. 1990, they went 13-3. They scored 95 points in their 2 AFC playoff games. They won the
Mm.
AFC Championship game 51-3 over the Raiders. They had 9 Pro Bowlers on that team. The Bills did. The Bills were loaded. And of course, we had a lot of gold jackets eventually going into Canton off that team. That team was loaded. They were better than the Giants. They
But,
just, quite frankly, they got out coached in the Super Bowl.
but was that the year of the Frank Reich comeback against the Oilers that
No,
year? No,
that
okay,
was
okay,
2 years later. I think
okay,
that was the 92
okay.
Bills, pretty sure.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So the 90 Bills just cruised through the playoffs and really the season. Excellent team. They were the better team in the Super Bowl. They did not win.
Yeah, I think of all the Bills 4 teams at the Super Bowl years, that I think you're right there. That wide right. I can't even say it
Yes.
right.
Right.
That's definitely a shocker and a killer and one of the most disappointing moments in Buffalo history, I'm sure.
Yeah. And I've always felt for Jim Kelly because he got him down there, right? They had the final drive, they got him in position. And, sometimes the kick goes in and sometimes it doesn't. And it's amazing how how 6, 7 feet can make such a difference in history for so long
Yeah, definitely
because they're
did.
still waiting. They're still
Yeah,
waiting.
They
Yep.
are. They are.
Yep.
They still have a lot of disappointing things like the
Yep.
13-second game and some
Yep.
others, the
Yep.
game last year. But yeah. Okay, so who do we have at 6?
Six, another offensive juggernaut, the 2013 Denver Broncos. This was the Peyton Manning's arrival in Denver. Their defense was not anything particularly great or wonderful to write home about, but their offense was insane in 2013. Um, they had, of their 16 games that they played, they went only once did they go under 400 total yards as an offense, and in that one that was 397. And then they
Mm.
had 5 games where they went over 500 yards of total offense, and Peyton Manning had 55 touchdown passes in that season. Their first 8 games were just off the charts. Like it's looking at the score log, it's crazy. That team was incredible. They beat the Patriots in the AFC Championship game. Um, and then, what's interesting about that is they got destroyed in the Super Bowl. The Seahawks killed them. That game was over early. That was the weird one in New York, where the first
Hmm.
potentially bad weather Super Bowl. I think there was a bunch of snow early, but it wound up being okay. But it was a little weird seeing everything about that was a little bit off. You're right. It was odd. It was cold weather. It was strange. Usually you're used to the Super Bowl being in a dome or in the early part of the game, the sun's still out, a lot of the time. And it was just odd. It was just odd to see the New York like that. And everything was off for the Patriots all night. I'm sorry, for the Broncos all night. So they kind of got dinged a little bit for getting so destroyed in the Super Bowl. But that is one of the greatest offenses in the history of the NFL.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely it was a strong team, and Peyton Manning, bad neck and all, really showed everybody that he could heal up and sort of shoving it back in the face of the Colts, I think, for taking Andrew Luck in the draft.
No doubt, no doubt. It was his best year as a pro.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. All right, we are at the halfway point. So who do you have at
Mm-hmm.
number 5?
Well, this is probably one you remember pretty well. This is going to be the 1978 Dallas Cowboys. This was another team that had a couple of Super Bowl disappointments during that era against the Steelers. But I thought this was the team that should be recognized the most. This was the second time that they played Pittsburgh in the Super Bowl. And this is probably the one that really kind of sticks to Cowboys fans. If you look at that Cowboys team, this is an incredible combo. You have a Hall of Fame coach, you have a Hall of Fame quarterback, you have a Hall of Fame running back, and you have a Hall of Fame general manager. So Tex Schramm, Tom Landry, Roger Staubach, Tony Dorsett, and you have 2 defensive guys that made the Hall of Fame, Randy White and Cliff Harris, right?
Hmm.
And they won the NFC Championship game that year against the Rams 28-0. That was probably the most dominant of the Roger Staubach era Cowboys teams. Unlike a lot of the teams on this list who were the better team and got upset in the Super Bowl or just kind of laid an egg in the Super Bowl, this team just ran into the Steelers of the 70s buzzsaw because Dallas wasn't the best team in the NFL that year, despite everything that I just said. They were the second best team. And it was just unfortunate for them to be that good in a year where they weren't the best. Um, and we can always go back to late in the third quarter of that game. It's 21-14 Steelers. At that point in the game, the Cowboys are keeping pace, right? And I'm sure you know which play I'm going to go to.
Oh
It's the
yeah.
Roger Staubach on third down. He hits Jackie Smith right in the chest for a touchdown. Smith drops it, right? And I think it's Vern Lundquist says, "Oh, he must be the sickest man in the world right now." I think
Hmm.
that's who was on the call for the Cowboys, and they settle for the field goal. It's 21-17, but it felt like that was the missed opportunity. When you have a team like Pittsburgh, you had to take advantage. You had to continue to keep pace, and they didn't. The Steelers kind of pulled away in the fourth quarter and won it. And I know that Jackie Smith play has always been one that's really stuck out for Cowboys fans because that was their opportunity that night.
Yeah, I agree with that was a big turning point there. But I think in the buildup of the 2 weeks that we had in between the championship games and the Super Bowl that year, and I remember this very vividly. There was bulletin board material because Hollywood Henderson, the Cowboys, I think it was a defensive back or maybe a linebacker. I can't remember which position he played, but that's when he was making comments about Bradshaw's intelligence, giving some insult, saying, he couldn't spell the word cat if he was spotted as CNEA or something to those
Yep.
effects. And I think Bradshaw took a little bit of offense to that, and that's why he had a pretty good game there. But yeah, it was a 4-point win for the Steelers, but the 4-point swing was on that Jackie Smith drop in the end zone.
Yes, it's kind of funny. I'm embarrassed to admit that I'm probably not nearly the reader I should be. But one book I remember that I remember reading, I think is probably an adolescent, maybe early teens, is I read Hollywood Henderson's biography, and that had some stories in it. I learned a lot about a lot of things from reading the sort of an off the rails NFL player in the '70s. Wow, I did not know that kind of stuff all happened outside the fields of play. I learned a lot from that book. But yes, I think Hollywood opened his mouth and Bradshaw shut it.
Yeah, that's for sure. And I think the rest of the Steelers were kind of upset about it too. I know Lambert he fired off on a couple of different plays and has some good quips that they got on film for NFL
Don't
film. Just
poke the
caught
bear,
him
man.
talking.
Just don't
Yeah,
do it. Yeah.
yeah, that's for sure. But it was a fun game to watch. A little bit stressful when you're a fan of one of the teams, but fun to watch.
Well, I'm not as old, Darren, so I don't remember watching it. So there you
Yeah, I think it's one of the
go.
greatest Super Bowls ever played,
I
personally.
think I think I was obsessed as a kid. I think it was the VHS tape with the first 20 Super Bowls on it, or 20 something, and I would watch that thing over and over and over and over again. So I had all the first 20 or so Super Bowls basically memorized as if I had watched them. And so yeah, that was always one of my favorite ones to stop and watch. That looked really awesome.
And how often do you get to see the best two teams, the best team from the AFC play the best team from the NFC? I know they say they go through the playoffs and everything, but there's a feeling for who the best team is in a year, and maybe that best team doesn't play well in the playoffs or gets knocked off. Um, how often do you see the two best teams play? And that was one
It
year where you definitely, I think it was, you could argue the Raiders, you could, argue a couple others, but I think the Steelers and Cowboys were the best two teams that year, just like you said earlier.
and in an era when you didn't have as many teams, first of all, and then no free agency. So the rosters were just loaded. If you did it right, you keep guys forever. So there's just Hall of Famers everywhere. There's a lot of familiarity at that point. The Steelers have been around since the early '70s, as had the Cowboys. So the fans across the league knew those teams. They knew the players. You had the Cowboys down south, the Steelers in the Rust Belt. It's very there's a lot to like about that.
Yeah, there was. I think if I'm not mistaken, there was I think a dozen total Hall of Famers involved in that game between the two sidelines, coaching staffs, the players.
Sounds
And
about
it's
right. Yeah,
yes, I think
sounds
it
right.
was
It's
one of the
pretty impressive.
most exposed thing of Pro Football Hall of Fame candidates being in one game in history. So it was pretty cool.
All right.
All
So
right, so
number four.
okay, let's go for
Number
it.
four. I don't know. You'll have to tell me if you remember this one or not. This one seems sort of obvious to me that kind of had to be on the list, and that would be the 1968 Baltimore Colts, who, of course, are going to have the most infamous Super Bowl loss of all time, I guess. That Colts team, they were first in defense in the NFL. Obviously, this is also before the merger. So they were, in the NFL. They were first in defense. They were second in offense. This kind of blew my mind. They forced 52 turnovers in a 14-game season. That is crazy. They went 13-1. They won the championship game over the Browns 34-0. And in that 13-1 record, only one of their 13 wins came by 7 or fewer points. So they were dominant in the NFL, which of course was viewed as the far superior league at the time. Playing the winner of the AFL was just an afterthought. And of course, the guarantee, Joe Namath, the biggest upset, maybe to this day, not only in NFL history, but maybe in sports history, changed the course of history. But that Colts team, maybe part of it was the Colts just didn't take the game very seriously. Maybe they weren't up for it. They got punched in the mouth and didn't really know how to respond. But that Baltimore Colts team was probably far better than the team that actually would wind up winning the Super Bowl a couple years later. But that '68 team was very very good and completely dominated the league.
But 2 years later, Super Bowl IV, they were an AFC team then.
Right, exactly. Yes, yep.
So they were the inferior team then, I guess,
There you go.
according
There
to
you
what
go.
they said
Yep.
2 years prior. Yeah, okay. I do not remember that one because
Okay.
I mean, this is how I remember what Super Bowl we're on. The first Super Bowl one, or what we now call Super Bowl one, was played in January '66. I was born in December '66. So, however
Okay.
old I am, I know that next Super Bowl will be a year older
You're as old
than
as the
me.
Super Bowl. Okay. There you
Yeah,
go.
well, I'm actually a little bit younger. I'm about 8 months,
No,
or
I
10,
won't
10
cheat
months,
you.
11 months younger than the
I
Super
won't
Bowl.
cheat you those 11 months.
Okay, all right.
There you
So, all
go.
right. So who do we have next at number three?
We're at number three, and this is probably the one that I would say is the most surprising on the list. Kind of it just kind of surprised me, and I bet you would probably maybe cause the most stir or argument coming back. I have the 2014 Seattle Seahawks, and this is a little bit, I don't have there's not as many numbers that stick out on this one. This is a little bit more eye test. That team, that 2013 and the 2013 team that won it, and the 2014 Seahawks were about as balanced of an NFL team as I can ever remember. You had even though he's become a little bit of um, there's controversy now about Russell Wilson and his place in history. At that point in time, he was easily one of the five best quarterbacks in the league. I think he's going to the Hall of Fame someday. He was so clutch and so good during that era for the Seahawks. They had the number one. This is the Legion of Boom. The Seahawks defense. They were the number one defense in the NFL that year. They had this amazing comeback win at home against the Packers in the NFC Championship game. Russell Wilson throwing an absolute dot in overtime to win it. A very special team in a city that had gone Seahawk crazy at the time. They were on their way to winning back-to-back Super Bowls, which really cements you in a legacy game. And of course, we remember the play, which we'll talk about here in a minute against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. But they were also winning that game 24-14 midway through the fourth quarter. So in addition to screwing it up so badly there at the end, they also had it before that. They kind of dominated the Patriots that night. Their defense was great. They were holding Brady down. Brady did get loose there at the end, got the Patriots the lead. Seahawks come down, great drive by Wilson. And I think what blows my mind about that play, which is going to be one of the most infamous plays in Super Bowl history, maybe NFL history, is they on first and goal from the 5. They gave it to beast mode. They gave it to Lynch, and he got 4 down to the 1. All right. There's 26 seconds left, and they have a timeout, and it's 2nd and 1. To me, to throw the slant there is maybe if you're 3rd down or it's 4th down or you have no timeouts and you're afraid you're gonna not be able to run another play. But the confluence of events there to have the extra 2 downs and the timeout and to still choose not to hand the ball off to Lynch is just one of the most baffling coaching decisions. It's a great play by Butler for the Patriots. I mean, incredible, awesome play. But it's just amazing that whole Seahawks legacy kind of gets ruined by that one decision. Because I think you and I both know they hand that ball to Lynch 3 times, he's getting in, and they're winning the Super Bowl. That's all they
Yeah.
had to do was hand the ball to their guy, and they didn't do it.
Yeah, if you have any running back, probably in NFL history, save Jim Brown or Larry Zonka, it's going to be you want Marshawn Lynch with the ball in his hand to get you 1 yard, 2 yards, because that dude is going to fight tooth and nail everything he has in his, all his energy and strength to try to get that ball over the goal line. Why you would not give that to him? And I think Pete Carroll just outsmarted himself and called a very poor play. And as we saw with Kurt Warner, we talked about with James Harrison, throwing a slant down at the goal line in the Super Bowl is probably not a good idea. There's some good
So,
defenses playing in the Super Bowl.
yeah,
And
and what's amazing is if they even if he gets stuffed, right? If he gets blown up, they lose 3 yards, whatever. You call your timeout. Now you got Russell Wilson from about the 3 or the 4 with a little more room to operate, and he gets 2 plays to win the Super Bowl for you. So it's just baffling. I didn't. The Seahawks knocked the Redskins out of the playoffs in 2012, and I was kind of bitter about that. So I was sort of rooting against them. And I was never a big Russell Wilson fan, but I did respect him. But so I was kind of rooting for the Patriots that game. But it was really, I think that's a very forgotten team. That 2014 Seahawks team was awesome. And then that play sort of was what everybody remembers that era of Seahawks football about. And it's kind of wild.
yeah, it is. And that's a really had to be a gut punch for Seahawks fans to have that because I can remember watching it and thinking, what just happened? Or what, you know, you have all this anticipation of what you think is going to happen, and all of a sudden, it's just boom, you see something really spectacular happen with Butler's interception. And it was
Amazing.
spectacular, and it's a
Amazing.
Super Bowl nobody will ever forget that watched it. So definitely a
Yep.
memorable moment. Okay, so speaking about memorable moments, who do you have at number two?
Number two, near and dear to my heart, Darren, the 1983 Washington Redskins, who might be the best team in Redskins franchise history. Obviously, that's going to go to the 91 team because they got it done. And there's some statistics on that 91 team that would point to that as well. However, the 1983 Redskins were incredible. They went 14-2. And in their two losses, do you know what the combined margin of loss was in those two games?
No idea.
It was 2 points. They
Really?
lost each of their games that year, their two that they lost by 1 point, both on Monday Night Football, actually. Both
Huh.
in very classic games, high scoring affairs, including a 48 to 47 loss to the Packers in Lambeau. But that was the Redskins at the time were the highest scoring team in NFL history. The 1983 Redskins were. They scored 541 points. That number held for many, many years. I can't remember exactly who broke it or when, but it was many years down the road before that got broken. And then what I find to be one of the most amazing NFL statistics I've ever seen is the Redskins that year were plus 43 in the turnover margin.
Hmm.
Not they forced 43 turnovers. They were plus 43. That is an average of about over 2.5 turnovers in your favor per game. That is nuts. They had like 34 interceptions from their defensive backs. So while that team was an absolute juggernaut offensively, the defense was super opportunistic as well. Made tons of plays. Very exciting team. Lots of personality with Theismann and Riggins, Dexter Manley. You had that was still the fun bunch. That was before the posse, but it was still the fun bunch. There was a lot of person hogs. That was a super fun team. Um, there's always been chatter, rumors, innuendo about what happened down in Tampa before they got smoked by the underdog Raiders. And there was some talk that maybe things got a little loose for the Redskins in the week or so leading up down in Tampa, that maybe they thought they already had it in the bag. Maybe there's a little too many late nights. Maybe for the one time in his career, Gibbs may have kind of lost the guys a little bit. He was a very strict disciplinarian and was very paranoid about taking them ever taking a team too lightly or anything like that. He was very famous for that. But something happened because that was not the '83 Redskins down in Tampa that got beat 38-9. But yes, that is, and I know for Redskin fans that one really still stings because it changes the narrative a little bit. They won 3 Super Bowls in the Gibbs one era. If they win that fourth one, then they're mentioned right there with the 49ers as the team of the decade.
Yeah, it probably could be. And I think they got the revenge though from that game against Elway. I think it was a year or two later when he
It was
just
87, yeah, a few
yeah
years
they
later.
just
And it's funny, the
abused
Redskins
the
that was the Gibbs thing. The three Super Bowl teams, the 82 and 83 were one team, and then 87 was a different team, and then 91 was a different team. They had like a few staples throughout there, a few anchors, but they really changed through Gibbs teams. But I think in a lot of ways, for especially the older than me, even if you can believe that, Redskin fans, that very first iteration with Theismann, Riggins, the Hogs is still sort of the one that's most near and dear to people's heart, I think. Um, um, and that game really stings. If you talk to any of the older school Redskin fans, they'll always talk about that fateful night in Tampa when it all fell apart.
yeah I'll bet yeah, but that probably of all the Redskins teams, that's the one I probably can remember the most players still to this
They
day,
were super
and
fun.
not even being a fan of the Redskins, so yeah, they're
Great
popular.
team.
Yeah.
Great team. But not the best team to ever lose the Super Bowl. And we all know who that is. I don't even know if we need to do a drum roll on this one. But we'll do it anyway. Drum roll, please. And so the best team to ever lose the Super Bowl is the 2007 New England Patriots. It's for all of the obvious reasons. 16 and 0. This almost made me laugh when I looked at it. For the first 8 games of the year, they averaged 41 points per game. That's like Alabama playing Mercer every week, not the NFL, right? They averaged 41 a game over their first 8. They slowed down a little bit after that. And of those 8 games, no game was closer than 21. So they were doing things in the NFL that we've just never, ever seen. Beyond going 16 and 0, they also were just killing people. Now, what's interesting is we all know how it ended for them in the Super Bowl with the Giants defense coming up with a brilliant plan, stopping them, the crazy helmet catch, and pulling off the biggest upset in the history of the Super Bowl. Sorry to the 1968 Colts. I do think that the Patriots probably is a bigger upset. Um, they did show some signs in the playoffs that year. They played Jacksonville and they played the Chargers. And all of a sudden, they won those games. And they weren't like super crazy close, but they weren't dominant either. And at one point in the fourth quarter, going into the fourth quarter of the game against the Chargers, it was 14-12 New England. And that was the game where Philip Rivers was playing with a torn ACL. And LaDainian Tomlinson wasn't playing because he was hurt. And the Chargers were hanging right with them. And I don't think many people thought much of it at the time. But looking back, I wonder if maybe something got exposed in the playoffs, something got uncovered that the Giants were able to take advantage of.
Well,
Uh,
didn't they play like the last Monday night game of the year, and the Giants gave
yes.
them a really close
The,
game and gave them a real scare?
Yeah, and it's funny because I've mentioned this a couple times. I've got a lot of Giants fans in my life, which include my brother-in-law. And I was like, oh, I'm kind of glad that the Giants gave him a good game that first one because now the Patriots will know what's up. They've seen them; they're going to destroy them in the Super Bowl. And while everybody else was probably rooting against the Patriots because of my brother-in-law and I was watching the game with him, I was so convinced that the Patriots were going to win, and then to have to watch him celebrate and then do it again a few years later, by the way, which made me even more upset. That was quite the evening. It was quite the shock, and that is the best team to ever lose the Super Bowl. And quite frankly, it might be the best team in the history of the NFL anyway.
You're sure you didn't want to change that to like the '95 Steelers or the 2010 Steelers?
No, sorry. I
Oh, okay.
did I did give the 2010 Steelers some consideration. 95, no thank you. Neil O'Donnell was not making this list.
The 2010 Steelers might be the best defensive team that to ever lose Super Bowl because
Yes,
they're pretty
they were
stout that
in the
year.
they were in the running for this list, but not your 95 guys. Sorry.
Yeah. It was a fun team because it was a
Yeah.
bunch of no names. It was fun.
Right.
So,
But that's your list, Darren.
All right. Well, I like the list. I like it. Very interesting. Great job. Great research. Great, insight onto the games and what you remember or what you read if you weren't alive during the game. Yeah, I think it's spectacular. So great job.
Well, thank you very much. We'll see who I missed. Let me know who I left out besides the 95 Steelers.
Okay. Yeah.
Larry Brown
Yeah.
just caught another interception, by the way.
Yeah, that was the Larry Brown. Yeah, God, let's not discuss Larry Brown on that or Neil O'Donnell. But so great job on that. We really appreciate you coming on here and giving us this top 10 and everything else you do to contribute to help make football history.
Thanks for having me. I love it.
That's all the football history we have today, folks. Join us back tomorrow for more of your football history. We invite you to check out our website, pigskindispatch.com, not only to see the daily football history, but to experience positive football with our many articles on the good people of the game, as well as our own football comic strip, Cleat Marks Comics. Pigskindispatch.com is also on social media outlets, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and don't forget the Pigskin Dispatch YouTube channel to get all of your positive football news and history. Special thanks to the talents of Mike and Gene Monroe, as well as Jason Neff for letting us use their music during our podcast.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.